Welcome to my regional comparison video of Legend of Hero Tonma. And in this video, I'm going to compare the US or World ROM. Not sure which one it is because in MAME it doesn't have a listing, but I believe it's either the USA or World ROM. And I'm going to show the differences between, the USA and World ROM and the Japanese ROM. Recently, I beat the Japanese ROM of the game. And, after beating it, I was surprised to have completed the game in 3 hours. And I thought I must have just became a much better player, but what it really was is the Japanese version is quite a bit easier, I noticed. So, years ago when I did beat this game, I beat either the World or USA ROM. It was this ROM, I believe, the one that doesn't have a title on it as far as World or USA, but it's not the Japanese ROM. And it's noticeably harder, and this is the one I remember beating because some of these parts took me a while to beat. Later in the game especially. So it was interesting after beating the Japanese version doing a tutorial on that with commentary on the channel. I wanted to check out and go back to the other version of the game. The reason I played through the Japanese version was just to get an extra game on my kill list because I didn't have that region completed and I figured it would be a good video for the channel as well. But I didn't realize it was an easier version. But after comparing them, I saw that it definitely was. So, first we're seeing the, I believe this is the US version of the game, if I remember right. And there's a huge difference between the difficulty in this version and the other version. One thing you'll notice is that everything is faster and more aggressive, but it's hard to notice in the footage, but you'll notice it when you play the game. And for the first boss, there's a very noticeable difference. The projectile that the boss has will actually home in on you and follow you around. See how it follows you around? It'll actually follow you around in this USA or World version. So this is one of the very noticeable differences in difficulty. If you can't tell by the bullet speed and shit, you can tell by the fact that this projectile will follow you around. And not only that, it will shoot out multiple projectiles that will follow you around at the same time. So when you see my comparison of the Japanese version, you're going to see that the first boss doesn't do that. This is a type of video that's kind of interesting to me, a topic that's interesting to cover because I'm always looking for this information, but I almost can never find it online. So I thought I would just try to put some information out there. I also covered some of this information for Marvel Land for the arcade when I beat that. And yeah, one thing you'll notice with those top guys on the second platform, notice how they shoot down at you immediately as you're approaching the right side of the screen, the end of the right side. Those guys are shooting down at you immediately, making it much harder to get up there. That's going to come into play when you see the comparison of the other version. You're going to notice that they don't shoot that fast. They're not going to be shooting down at you like that. It's just super aggressive. You see how aggressive this is. And it's going to be kind of hard to notice with footage if you're not playing the game, but it is a one-hit death game, and it makes a big difference. So let's see it again. See them shooting down immediately at you as you're approaching. Tons of bullets. So now let's check out the Japanese version, and we'll notice some of the big differences that I mentioned. The first boss is a very noticeable one. I didn't really memorize all the little differences. I just went by feel, but these are just things that I picked up on. I was just curious. I just wanted to see if I had really, in fact, become that much better at games since 2014 when I beat this harder version, or if the Japanese version really was that much easier. And, I got my answer. The Japanese version is definitely considerably easier. Not to say it's an easy game. It's still a challenging game, and, especially for players that are not familiar with going through these kind of games. But it wasn't too bad for me. And I had remembered the original game being much harder. And I think if I did go through this game again, the USA version or World version, it would definitely take me longer this time around to beat. It would probably take me longer than 3 hours, even with the practice I got recently on the Japanese version. But it's hard to say, but I think it probably would from what I was playing. But, it's tough to say because the game is short if you know what to do. But I might be able to manage it faster. I may try it again at some point. But see, even on this part is much harder in the other version. See how easily I took that statue out and taking these guys out? I had to play that part a lot more carefully on the USA/or World version, whichever one it is, since it's not labeled. So I did notice that. That part was harder. But the first boss was definitely a lot harder. I definitely noticed it with the boss. Because you'll see here that the projectiles from the skeleton boss will not home in on you like that. And basically what they do is he shoots off the projectile, and then it goes up to the screen, and it just leaves the screen. And there'll only be one projectile at a time, and they won't follow you at all. They just leave the screen. So that's a big difference right there. So you can see that they made an effort to try to make the other version harder or to try to make this version easier. I don't know which one came first, but either way, they were intentionally, made to have different difficulties for, different regions that they were released in. So see, when he fires his projectile, it just leaves the screen and that's it. Doesn't follow you, and he doesn't fire two at the same time. So that's already a big difference. Now, this is an easy boss regardless, but it just shows that if they're doing that kind of shit on the first boss, you can expect the rest of the game to follow suit and be a lot harder overall. I didn't do a full comparison or anything. I didn't go through, the US version again to do a comparison or anything like that. I don't have my old footage from when I beat the US version, since I didn't start recording until maybe 2016. So it was about 2 years too late to get the footage. Now, I can't say if the first boss, if there's any difference in the hit points or anything. It felt about the same, but the main thing I noticed was that, the fireball leaves the screen. So now if you see me going to the right side, I'm taking a different path now, but if you see me going to the right side, you'll see that the guys don't fire down at you like they did before. And I believe I show that. I think I do have footage of that. I wasn't making this footage for the purpose of making a comparison video, so it's not, it's not tailored for that. But I think I show enough to give you a general idea that it is indeed harder. Well, this version is the easier version, but the Japanese version is the easier version, and it's probably a recommendation. If you haven't beat this game before, maybe start with the Japanese version, to get some practice. And beat that first if you're not familiar with these kind of games, The game has one stage that's particularly difficult in both versions, but in the USA version, it's really, really fucking hard. In the Japanese version, it was tough, but it only took me an hour to beat that stage. I think if I played the other, the USA version, it might take me longer than an hour to beat that again. But maybe I'm underestimating how it would be. I haven't gotten that far again yet in recent times, so I don't know exactly how it would feel now. I've definitely gotten better at games, but not to the degree that I thought, comparing it to how my experience was in 2014 with the harder version of the game compared to this. It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, it is probably hard to tell in the footage. But if I do eventually walk over to the right, you'll see they don't shoot down. See, the guys would have already been shooting down at me, I'm pretty sure, by now. They don't just stand there and wait. And you see the guys aren't shooting. See how they're not shooting right now? They're still not shooting, you notice? And if you remember the other version, they were immediately trying to gun me down all at once. It was like a barrage of bullets. Now, I don't know, it seems like maybe the bullets and stuff are faster too, and just way more aggressive, a lot more bullets, a lot more fireballs were coming out of those statues and barrels and shit, all kinds of shit was coming out. It was just way more aggressive, and I felt it immediately, without really trying to compare it, I just felt the difference, And I was like, okay, this shit is a lot harder. And then I remembered, I was like, well, this is how I remember the game being. I remember it being a pretty hard fucking game. One of the harder arcade games that I beat. And I was wondering, why, because it really didn't seem that fucking hard. But that was because I was playing the Japanese version. So I thought it would be an interesting little side video. I don't really have a playlist for this kind of video because I've never done regional comparisons before. But if it does get, if it gets any kind of interest or anything like that, maybe I'll do future ones, down the line. It was just something that made sense to do because I just happen to have tried both versions. And I usually post, a series called Trying It Out where I try out games. I figured I would just, kind of combined trying out the other version with my old footage of my recent footage of beating the Japanese version. I figured I'd combine both footages and just give a little outline of what I noticed. Regional differences is always a good thing to know when you're trying to beat a lot of games, because sometimes you may want to check out a version. If it's a much harder version, you may want to play it and beat it just to beat that harder version as an extra challenge. Or you may want to practice on an easier version. So I find it always useful information, but it's very hard to find that information online. There are some texts out there that will go over some of that stuff, but it just seems like it's really obscure. Whenever I want information on a specific game, it's usually not available. And there's so many different platforms. You have arcades, you have NES, you got modern consoles. I don't think it's much of a thing with modern consoles anymore, except for maybe some censorship on PS5. Maybe some games get censored in certain regions. But I don't think there's really difficulty differences anymore between regional regions and shit. I don't think they really do that anymore. But it was definitely a big thing in the 80s and 90s. Especially with, a lot of NES, Genesis, Super Nintendo games, a lot of them, the Japanese versions tended to be easier back then. And the US versions were made to be harder. And a lot of that is because people theorize that it's because of the rental market. They wanted people to rent games more, and shit like that. But I don't know really what the reason was, but it happened a lot. If you have any questions, let me know. And thanks for watching.